Welcome to the Oddschecker Masters podcast. I'm your host, George Elek. I'm joined by two very expert guests. On my right, it is, of course, the Oddschecker's legendary tipster, Niall Lyons, who's come over from Belfast this morning. And to my left, Beirne, a quantitative analyst for 15th Club, who's come over from Dublin. So this is going to sound, I think I'm going to sound unbelievably posh here because it's with two Irishmen on either side of me. But firstly, before we get into, this is my favourite time of the year. I've managed to book a flight to Italy on open weekend, which means that this year, this Masters is especially important because I'm probably going to miss the second best weekend of the year. But before we get into what it takes to win at Augusta and asking you both kind of who you're looking at and the stats that are important to picking the winner, Dylan, can you just give us, for people who don't know, just give us a brief intro as to what the 15th Club do, and for those who haven't heard of you, I think they'll be pretty, they'll know quite well some of the work that you guys have been instrumental in doing in golf recently.
Yeah, I guess on kind of at a high level, we're a data analytics company. There's basically two parts to the company. So it's 15th Club, which is the golf side, and then there's 21st Club, which is the football side of the business. The 15th Club side started back in 2015 as part of kind of a project that Darren Clark wanted to bring in data analytics and kind of some statistical analysis into Ryder Cup decisions and picking parents, picking players, different things like that. So that's how it started, and it kind of developed on from there. So more recently, we've got a deal with the European Tour to provide a platform for calculating strokes gained for players in the European Tour. And kind of at the minute now, we've spread into working individually with about 30 different players, and work with Sky Sports as well, kind of providing different insights to them to try and tell the story of what's going on a little bit better. But yeah, that's the general summary of what we do.
And I think, I'll have to blow your trumpet for you. Like you were fairly instrumental. I think the first person or the first people that Danny Willett thanked after his Masters win was the 15th Club. I think you were fairly instrumental from what I've heard from your colleagues in some of the pairings at the National as well last year. So it seems like you're having a fairly big input, not only into the way that golf stats are digested, but also the play itself.
Yeah. I guess on the Danny Willett story, I suppose Danny was he was conscious that he mightn't have been able to prepare as well as he could for the Masters that year, because he'd obviously just had a baby, so he kind of wanted to get some help on that, so that was a big part of that. And then more recently, obviously in France, that was a big success. So we were we did some work on obviously the course and then the pairings and the different players that would play there. So yeah, as it played out, obviously the players played incredibly well, but I think it played out pretty well for the team and for us, kind of in the way that the course setup impacted the overall result. So yeah, it was good.
So we have you to thank from Hollywood. Is that basically it?
That was a good one. That was kind of because the way we try and do it is like a kind of a combination of, obviously you can't kind of do too much with stats, but you can start the process. So we kind of send over some initial thoughts to Thomas and the captains, and then they'd come back with, how does this work and how does this look? So then we'd kind of go over and back a little bit. So I think originally, Fleetwood was like the second best partner for Molinari, but then, when you factor in the kind of personal relationships and things like that, then evidently it worked out very well. But yeah, it was great. The whole process with the captains was excellent this time, and it worked very well, in both directions.
I was behind the ropes, I'm sure you were inside them, and it was a pretty special weekend. Niall, famously not a massive fan of the Ryder Cup, and I think you, as you always say, you support the Yanks as well, so I'm hoping we're sitting here very smugly at the moment. But in fairness, you can sit even smugger because you are currently 83.27 points up with your tipping in 2019, so showing no signs of slowing down after what was an unbelievable year last year. How do you, approaching this Masters, I know a lot of people out there, myself included, who like to bet on the Masters and do so kind of using their own methods, feel like this is one of the easier competitions to bet in, because in my opinion you can draw a line through a fair few of the runners, but I know that you, whilst agree with that, feel slightly differently as well.
Yeah, I just think down the years I've had a much better record in the other majors, particularly the US Open and the Open Championship here. As you say, it is a limited field at Augusta, and obviously there's 30 or 40 out the back that can never really compete, so the field is limited somewhat, and plenty of people then think it's much easier to pick a winner, but I look at the likes of Carnoustie last year, where you look at the aspects of the course and how players will need to keep the ball in play from tee to green, this, that and the other. You can narrow down the field in a championship like that a lot easier, I think, than Augusta. I don't know, everybody says big hitters at Augusta, those who hit it right to left off the tee and things like that, and you can whittle it down that way. But I think at Augusta there's just, out of those 20 or 30 players at the top who have really good legitimate chances of winning, I think it's very hard to choose between them every year.
And it's interesting because the reason why obviously you think you can draw a line through these players is because every year the competition is held at Augusta National, and you've mentioned the long hitters theory that you need to be able to hit the ball at a certain distance. There have been players in the past that have maybe paid to that idea. The likes of Luke Donald definitely should have or could have won the year that Rory fell away. You're looking at Zach Johnson, who's obviously done very well there before. And then, reading, anyone who hasn't read Ben Coley's player-by-player guide, I would recommend it on Sporting Life. And I was reading through it, and he talks about Brandon Grace, and Brandon Grace looks like a massive price currently at 150 to 1. But as he mentions, he can't, as you need to, hoist it up high and land it like a feather on a bed of bubblegum, which I thought was a good way of saying, you need that high ball flight on Augusta in order to basically access pins. So what is it? What is the game? We'll come to you first, Niall, and then we'll look at it more statistically. But what, just in terms of player shape, the kind of game that you need, the trajectory that you need, what are you looking for at Augusta?
Well, there's a myriad of things that you really need. You obviously long hitting, as I mentioned, is important, and you look at the stats down the years. It is those who win and finish in the top 5 have always been big hitters. Obviously the grass at Augusta and the fairways is all mown towards the tees. It makes the course so much longer. What is it on the yard is 7,300 roughly, but it could play up to 7,007, 7,008 really when you take that grass into consideration. So short hitters, whether they can win it nowadays is a big question. Obviously it's Zach winning it, a number of years ago. That was a fair way to go now. Recently, Willett and Spieth, they're not that big hitters. Even Paddy Reed, he gets the ball out of fair away, but maybe not as big as some of the others. So,
what do you think last year on that final day? You've got Reed out in front, and then it's Ricky and Ricky obviously hits the ball to fairway, but with Ricky and Spieth chasing, doesn't that kind of go against the idea that it's a Thomas Paradise?
I don't think so. I think those guys do get it out there, towards 300 and past 300. But one of the most important things for me in the last couple of years, I thought, has been ball trajectory coming into the greens. You really need a high ball flight, I think. Particularly to take advantage of a number of par 4s that come the end of the week, I think will be really important to the scoring. 14th, for example, obviously you see it the final day, there's some favourable pin positions. 7th is another with a favourable pin position on the Sunday where you see balls just rolling up to the hole, easy birdies all the time. But there's a number of par 4s where you really do need to capitalise on, and I think high ball flight is a big advantage on those holes, particularly throughout the whole course.
And obviously the way that Niall and I are talking at the moment is fairly, it's not very stats based, it's just rhetoric. So what kind of statistical advantages and numbers do you weight heavily at Augusta?
Well, I had a look actually at kind of some of the numbers, obviously for the winners in the top 10s over the last few years, but also their numbers leading into the event, because that's where we are right now. We're trying to pick somebody based on their numbers at the minute. So they both kind of showed up pretty similar patterns in that, at a high level, the player, it sounds very simple, but they need to be in really good form coming into the event. It's generally you're not going to win unless you're playing at a kind of, what we found is like the average is 2.6 strokes gained on the field per round, which is like top 5 in the world kind of standard.
Because I'm sure strokes gained will come up a fair bit. For those people who don't necessarily understand that metric, can you, in layman's terms, explain? Because you see strokes gained putting, strokes gained tee to fairway, fairway to green. How do you, very simply, how do you measure that?
Yeah, so the strokes gained total number is just the player's score minus the field average. So if somebody shoots a 71 and the field average is 72, they've gained a stroke on the field. And then we break that further down into off the tee, approach shots around the green and putting. The way we break it down is basically the average number of shots from wherever a player is taking the shot from, minus the average number of shots from where it finishes, -1, because they've taken a shot in between. So if you're 400 yards away in the fairway, or 400 yards away off the tee, it's about 4 shots to the hole. So if you put it to, say, 80 yards away, and you're in the fairway, then you're going to have gained probably about a quarter of a stroke off the tee. So that's roughly the summary of it, and the same principle for putting. So if you're in a position where you're 8 feet away, that's about a stroke and a half on average. So if you hold the putt, then you've gained half a stroke on the field by holding that putt. But yeah, so to go back to that, so the high level is that the player needs to be in good form. They need to be playing roughly at a level of a top 5 in the world player coming into it. And then more specifically, it's the approach play and the off the tee to an extent, but more specifically approach play as they come in. So nobody has actually gone back to 2007. Nobody has won coming in gaining less than 0.2 of a stroke per round on approach, that actually counts out quite a good chunk of the field. And then following on into the winners and the top 10s at the event itself, the average kind of 11th ranking in approach play at the event. So they gain about 6.3 strokes on average on approach compared to kind of 2.3 off the tee. Then there's another factor that needs to be added in, I think, on the week. So coming into it, a player's putting form isn't necessarily that important. 7 players since 2007 have actually won coming in with negative strokes gained average in the previous 50 rounds or so. But they need to be able to get hot that week with the putter, which is, it's no surprise to anybody, but it's something that I was a little bit surprised that their form coming into it is less relevant. But there's a big requirement on the week, because for winners, actually, they gain about 6.9 strokes on average on the greens, so even more so than the approach play. So that's the kind of key findings that we've got at the minute, that coming into it, you need to be gaining strokes on approach, but then you need to have the ability to get hot on the greens in the week.
I mean, that all seems to make pretty good sense, and I think always the issue with golf punting is trying to work out who's going to get hot on the green. It's a pretty impossible thing to do. And does that now kind of play into how you approach picking your players, what you've just heard from Dylan there? I mean, is it basically incorrect to look too hard at putting stats before Augusta?
It's something that I don't particularly look at personally. Week to week of any event, I think you just got to, as you say, just try and get a bit hot on the greens.
Yeah.
Obviously you got the likes of Spieth, a number of years ago he was just absolutely outrageous on the greens, and you could count on him almost every week, especially when he was in form and holding putts. He kind of went through streaky periods. But yeah, it's hard to tell. You definitely couldn't rule anybody out down the list who hasn't been putting great lately, in my opinion anyway. I've looked at the last 3 or 4 winners, and a big stat for me has to be par 4 scoring. The last 3 winners have all ranked first in that stat over the week, and I think that's you'll hear plenty of people saying, in order to contend here, in order to win, you're going to need to make your score in the par 5s, and there's no doubt that you do need to capitalise on the par 5s, but the difference between a top 20 or a top 10 and maybe winning it will be the par 4 score. I think it's just limiting bogeys and you getting a score somewhere in the region from level par to roughly 5 under on the par 4s. I think that'll be the talent difference between someone just in contention or the winner.
We've spoken now there for about kind of in-game stats a fair bit, and Dave Tyndall wrote a piece on Betfair about kind of the trends that maybe, some people are very trends-based and they look into this a lot. Some people think that it's not particularly valuable, but a couple of interesting ones. 10 of the last 10 winners were aged under 40. Not a massive surprise there. Bad news for Matt Kuchar, who's just turned 40. 9 of the last 10 have been ranked in the world's top 30, suggesting that class does really come to the fore here. 10 out of 10 have played at least one Masters before, so no surprise that you need some course form. 10 out of 10 had also posted a top 38 at Augusta. 9 out of 10 a top 30 in the past as well, and 10 of the last 10 had posted a top 10 winner that season. So it's not particularly surprising, all of that. It's basically just saying good players go well, and you need a bit of course form. But the one I'm going to take out of that and discuss now is that stat that 9 of the last 10 have been ranked inside the world's top 30. And as such, we'll look at the top end of the market straight away. So I'll quickly run through the current prices. This is being recorded on the Wednesday the week before. So, if, for example, Jordan Spieth goes and wins in Texas this weekend, we can obviously expect his price to shorten fairly dramatically if you're listening to this in the run-up to the weekend. But at the moment, Rory McIlroy is 7-1, Dustin Johnson is 10-1, Tiger Woods 14-1, Justin Rose 14-1, Justin Thomas 18-1, John Rahm is 18-1, Ricky Fowler 22s, Jordan Spieth 25s, Francesco Molinari 25s, Paul Casey 28s, Koepka and Fleetwood the same price, and then DeChambeau, Day 33s, Hideki Matsuyama 35s, then 40-1 Bar. So of those, we'll start towards the top end as we should, with Rory McIlroy, who's having, in many respects, a pretty unbelievable season, except for Sundays, and that seems to have changed a little bit with that win a couple of weeks ago at the Players, a really important win, undoubtedly there. So let's start with Rory Niall. He's a player. He needs this for the career major slam. He's obviously gone well at the track before, very famously without being able to win there. How do you think he comes into this one, and do you think that 7-1 is a fair price?
I think it is a fair price, yeah. One that I haven't really decided yet whether I'll back or not, but certainly in the mix. He's played brilliant all year. He really has, and as we say, just on the Sundays, he just hasn't been performing up to his standard. And Sawgrass, I think, can fall into that bracket as well. To be honest, I think he was just maybe a shade lucky that a good bunch of others didn't turn up with their best game that day either. Dustin Johnson was poor. A couple of others, at the end of the day, his main rivals on the Sunday towards the finish were Jim Furyk and Johnny Vegas. But again, it's a win at Sawgrass, and I think it was 5 top 5s on the trot, or top 6s on the trot since the start of the year in Hawaii. And I think the defeat in the match play to Tiger hurt last week. I was surprised at how much it meant to both of them. Obviously, I'm not a massive fan of match play, but I think it took a lot out of Tiger, as we've seen afterwards. And I think McIlroy didn't talk to the media and all after. I think he was quite disappointed with that defeat. But coming to Augusta, he's just in great form, and it was kind of heartache for us last year. Obviously, we had backed him, and he had just a shade of odds on after the 7th hole, where he stuck it into a couple of feet for the eagle and then missed the putt. He holds all the aces, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I find it hard just not to see him out of the shaky. He has to be in the top 5. Just can't see him not being there.
It's one of those, when there's place terms at the moment, Coral go 10 places, and they are understandably for that reason basement price at 6-1. But you'd think the place terms will open up in the next few days, and then if you're getting kind of 10 or so places around that 7-1 mark, then it looks like a decent crack. And we spoke about the player that you want to have at Augusta, distance off the tee and high ball flight with your approach play. McIlroy seems to fit that bill pretty well, doesn't he?
Yeah, very much so. He's probably got one of the higher ball flights on tour, so obviously that's a big benefit. I'm just looking at his ranks worldwide this year in the 4 different areas. So he's first off the tee, he's 15th in approach, 31st around the green, and 80th in putting, which is, 80th doesn't sound that impressive, but it's, when you consider worldwide both tours, it's a very, very impressive stat, particularly for him. He's miles clear of the kind of recent strokes gained rankings worldwide as well. So he's definitely it's no surprise he's the form guy. He's got super history here over the last 5 years. He's got the 3rd best scoring average of anybody around the course. So it's absolutely a fair price, I think, at that.
And the 2 ahead of him, Spieth and Rose.
Yeah. So Spieth is 3.3 in the last 5 years, 3.3 strokes gained per round. Justin Rose 2.7, and then Rory's 2.5. And then Paul Casey's actually 2.4, which is
interesting. Quite
an interesting one to throw in there.
Yeah, last year he was my big bet for top 20, dead and buried, and then suddenly he shot a very low score on Sunday, which was great to see. Yeah. I think we can be fairly positive on Rory's chances there. We're not really taking him on as a vulnerable favourite. And second in the betting is Dustin Johnson at 10-1, who had a tricky time of it in the match play. I don't think we want to pay too much attention to that. And in typical style, he preceded that with 4 top 10s in a row, including a win in the WGC at Mexico. And he's another player who I think, Niall, it's fair to say, you're sweet on his chances too.
Yeah, well, he would be the one pick at the minute that I'm pretty sure that I will bet, and I've already started betting in the last couple of months. Just doing absolutely nothing wrong, even in defeat, and obviously he's got almost the exact same game as Maclo, as we say, just bombs it off the tee and the high trajectory ball flight, which really helps. He's in the top 10 of that par 4 scoring average this season as well, which is important for me. And obviously ticks all the trend boxes basically of the top 5 finishes. And obviously a win earlier on in the year is a big advantage heading to Augusta as well, although he's got 2 with the win in Saudi Arabia as well. But yeah, it ticks all the boxes for me, and I find it hard to say how to shake up too, and it's very, very boring. I don't like myself saying it, but the top 2 in the market look so strong to me in this.
He's going to touch the top 2 and take a 7-2 shot, I think.
There's a big possibility, and I'm already fearing having to do it next week in the backdraft to get whenever the preview goes
I don't think when people turn on this podcast, they wanted to hear you tipping up the top 2 in the market. No, hopefully we'll get some value later on. I mean, can you pour any cold water, I should say, on that?
And DJ, no, not really. I think for me, if I was choosing between back and Rory at 7s and DJ at kind of 9s or 10s, I'd probably take DJ.
Yeah.
I don't think there's that much of a gap between them. I think Rory's obviously in slightly better form at the minute. But looking a little bit longer term, DJ just so rarely plays badly. You know, you find, like, the Players is a good example where didn't really seem to be there. He wasn't kind of in contention, and then all of a sudden on Sunday his name pops up in the leaderboard. He just does that so often. He misses cuts so rarely, and you know, I'd be very surprised if he was outside the top 10. But
I worry about his putting just at the minute, like this last number of weeks of, you know, obviously he struggled.
Apparently that's a positive, you know.
It's
definitely.
But he's just struggled with a putter obviously down the years. He's had so many changes, and then I think earlier on in the year he went back to a putter that he won the US Open with and all, and I was quite happy with that because I was thinking of Masters, and you know, he's on that line. But in the last couple of weeks that I've watched him, and Sawgrass as well, he missed plenty of putts. It's the one worry for me. Obviously the greens at Augusta are that slick and fast, and plenty of people will miss putts, and even the best of them will miss putts, but that's the one negative for me.
And again, Niall, despite that you know, the drift in the form, he's a player that you're going to look to get with.
Yeah, I haven't totally made up my mind whether we're going to back him yet, but as you say, at the back end of last year, if someone told you were going to get 20 to 1 plus about him winning a major, then you would jump at the chance. Obviously, recent form really does take a bit of a hit, but you know, in betting terms, sometimes you just got to think long term. Just got to think of the price, and he's won 3 of his last 6 majors. I think he's missed 2 in the last couple of years through injury, but 3 out of the last 6 majors. If anybody else arrived here in that major form, you would be lucky to see double figures about them. It's just strange. He does remain to be a kind of unpopular figure in the betting market, and almost in the media as well. You know, I think a few in his team and around him have said that, you know, he wins the US Open and goes into the press conference like there's nobody there to listen to him, kind of thing. Nobody wants to hear. You know, and it's not through a dislike of him. I think it's just because the manner of his wins. And
it feels to me like if there's anyone in this field who could care less about winning the Masters, it would be Brooks Koepka.
Yeah, but that's obviously been an advantage down the last couple of years.
Fair enough.
And, you know, a lot of the recent major winners, and especially at Augusta here in the last 10 years, have been first-time major winners as well. That kind of proves, you know, even those with major experience and who have got over the line, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it's positive in the end. But for Koepka, as you say, he's just that so lackadaisical thinking about it, and I think that turns into an advantage. And he's got all the tools for Augusta when you think about it. Everything's there, and he's improved year on year. I think he finished 33rd, then maybe 22nd, and then 11th last time out at Augusta. That's not too bad. Obviously, there's plenty of trends there to tell you to look for. You know, someone who's landed a top 10, but that's 3 improvements in 3 years there, and he just can't be far off. At the start of the year, I was maybe thinking he could go off favourite for this.
Yeah,
it's just obviously the recent form that you know, and obviously recent bats that makes that 28 to 1 sit there, but I couldn't put anyone off it at the minute.
Well, the good news is that there's a man who's going to try and put you off, hopefully to my left now. So we spoke before about kind of a couple of positives and a couple of negatives, and you had Brooks down as a negative.
Yeah, I think it probably ties into what Niall was saying a little bit. I mean, just the recent form is the big thing putting me off him. I mean, look, it wouldn't be a massive shock, obviously, to me if he went out and won it. But personally, like I said, it's very rare for someone to come into this event and win it having not been in good form beforehand. Or that's what the numbers would suggest anyway. I think Angel Cabrera came in and won it in roughly similar form to what Brooks is in now.
I think that's the first time those two have ever been compared.
Probably, yeah. But he's the only one that's won it at a level that he's playing at right now. So that would be the big thing that would put me off him. And look, he is a good price at that, but it probably would be a lay for me.
And we're going to have to return the favour now. So I'm going to come to you and one of your positives in Justin Thomas, who's currently 18-1. A player that you like the look of coming into this.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think he fits all the boxes that I kind of spoke about before. He's right up there. I think he's top 5 in short term strokes gained on the field. He's obviously kind of well up in the long term numbers as well. In 2019 so far, he's 4th in approach play worldwide. Leads the PGA Tour in shots from 125 to 150, which are pretty key around Augusta. That's kind of one of the most common yardages there. So there's just a huge amount of positives for me. Again, doesn't play that badly all that often. So worst case scenario, if we're getting 10 places on it, I'd definitely have a go on him.
Is there a concern? And maybe I should, because I know that Niall, he's one of your negs. So maybe I'll put it to the floor this one rather than going to one of you. Masters record is tied 39th, tied 22nd, tied 17th. For most players, that would be a decent record at Augusta, but I think it's probably quite underwhelming for JT.
To a certain extent, yeah, but at the end of the day, we've seen Will at the one. I think his best place finish previous to that at the Masters was 38th, and there's been a couple of others. I think when Bubba won his previous best finish, when he first won it, his previous best finish was around 40th, and there's definitely those finishes by Thomas in the last couple of years are definitely good enough to suggest that he can contend and possibly win here. He's one of them golfers I just find him very hard to judge, and I just don't know which courses to back him on. He does have all the tools, but as we say, for Augusta he hits the ball a long way, and obviously he's a top class golfer, but he just hasn't really impressed me all that much this season. Obviously his results are great compared to most, but yeah, he's not a huge positive for me.
Another man that you like, Dylan, is a player that I was pretty confident I would be backing this Masters, but the recent form slightly dissuaded me in Xander Schauffele. An unbelievable season last year, seems to play very well in small field events, in events with class fields as well. That ridiculous hot streak seems to have tailed off a little bit. Having said that, I mean, he missed the cut of the players, but except for that, it's all top 30s. Tied 24th, worst, tied 25th at the Farmers. He's 45-1 at the moment, world number 10, so certainly fits the bill of a top 20, top 30 player as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and he kind of fits, again, going back to some of the things that I picked out, he's obviously, when you look at his form, it mightn't look that impressive in the numbers, but the strokes gained against the field, which is kind of what I'm basing a lot of it on, is good enough to kind of qualify. He's plus 2.32, which is slightly below the average for winners, but it's definitely thereabouts. He's 17th in approach this year worldwide, which again is top quality. He's 21st off the tee, and 37th in putting. So, he's got a very well-rounded game, which is, I would expect that's going to be key. I had a look at, I kind of touched on getting hot with the putter as well. So he's got one of the highest percentages of events where he gains 4 strokes or more with the putter, of the top players. So I think it's like you said, it's tough to quantify how likely a guy is to get hot with the putter, but when he does, he tends to be the kind of player who will either be very hot or kind of average with the putter, which is kind of what you want around Augusta. So we know he's got the approach play, he's got the play off the tee, he's got the potential to get hot with the putter, and then obviously, he's a quality player, he's number 10 in the world, so I think the 45-1 is a very generous price on him at the minute.
And I guess the tied 50 last year, definitely not a negative, because he's got the course form behind him. He may have done particularly well, he made the cut,
yeah.
And it shows that he can do it there. We'll come on to a couple of players that you guys don't like in a second, but we cannot. There are two players that we need to touch on, I think. Probably three players we need to touch on before we move on towards the other end of the market. Firstly, let's talk about Tiger. Tiger is 14-1 for this, third favourite, which I can't even say it without having a little grin on my face, because I can't think of anything better. Like as it was at the Open Championship, but even better to see Tiger in red on a Sunday challenging for another green jacket. It's so hard. I mean, it's easier now, I guess, to work out whether or not he's a price than it was when we were talking about this Niall last year when it was all a bit up in the air. But how do you assess Tiger's chances coming into this?
I was quite impressed with him last week at the match play for the first time this year, and I kind of get the impression that maybe that was the first time this year that he's actually really cared or wanted to win. You know, not that I'm accusing him of that on any other events, like, but coming up against McIlroy in the match play, I think really G'd him up. But he knew that was on the horizon if he got through the groups. You know, obviously played some spectacular shots there last week, holding out from the fairway as well. Yeah, I was quite impressed with him then, and I think he could contend here. I definitely wouldn't be betting him around that price, given the form of the two ahead of him in the market for a start. Far other back DJ at 10s than Tiger at 14s, but I do think he has every chance. What else to say about it? As you say, it'd be unbelievable to see it.
I hope those two, maybe those three at the top of the market, going head to head on the Sunday. Thoughts on Tiger?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have probably underestimated just how well he's played over the last year or so. I think I remember looking towards the end of last year that if the world rankings had started at the start of 2018, he would have been 5th, I think, or 4th maybe. So, he's been right up there. I think since the start of this year, he's been basically the 6th best player in the world, based on his strokes gained. And then one of the key things, again, as I've said numerous times now, the approach play is 18th in approach play worldwide. So, the quality's there. I don't think there's any question that he can win it, but it depends on how he shows up. But yeah, like Niall said, I'd take DJ ahead of him at 10s than 14s and Tiger, but definitely won't be laying him because I don't want him coming up the stretch on Sunday with me cheering against him.
Yeah, and I think we'd all love to see Patrick Reed putting the green jacket on Tiger Woods after what happened in Paris as well.
Absolutely.
We'll lump these guys in together. We've touched on it briefly before. But arguably, I mean, Jordan Spieth is quite clearly, at least in recent years, an Augusta specialist. Justin Rose's record there also absolutely unbelievable, although you have to think that maybe what happened back in 2017 somewhat derailed him last year, where he was a little bit below par, given his record there in the past. Spieth, it's impossible. I mean, ridiculous to see him in that first round of the match play last week, having not been able to, having struggled with the putter so much, then go and hit 2 fairways and hold putts from absolutely everywhere. Yeah. It seems impossible to work out how to judge Jordan Spieth's game at the moment, but at the same time, going into Augusta, he's 25-1. Is this like a once in a lifetime opportunity, or is this one to stay clear of?
Who knows? We'll see in a couple of weeks. But there were signs last week. There were signs, and coming back from 3 or 4 down in a couple of matches to contend, I think were just a sign that that fight's still in him anyway. The thing that really impressed us, and obviously when he won the Open, obviously he had to really fight for that. It's great to watch him fight for them championships, because he's never perfect. That's what's so exciting to watch about him. But he arrived here the last couple of years in not great form either, and he still managed to pull it off. Not to win in the last couple of years, but contend. And can I see it happen again? Yes, definitely. It'll be interesting to see what happens this week in Texas.
You might think it might be the perfect kind of pipe opener. He's been able to stay probably at home in Texas for the last couple of weeks. Yeah. Just get back to a little bit of form, a little bit of continuity ahead of this big weekend.
Well, he was the first one on the range at the match play last week as well. I think he arrived on the Sunday, and I was quite, just impressed to see him really working on the game, and obviously he will be. And you go through a period like that in his career, the amount of work that he must be putting in is huge. Just to get back to where he was, and I fully expect him to get back to that kind of form again. It'll probably be this year, but throughout that whole period of bad form, you were waiting on the drift.
Yeah,
and it never happened.
Yeah, I know.
It's only really happened in the last week or two, and now you're getting 20-1 or whatever. But
25s at the moment.
You couldn't back him.
Yeah. Well, I'm tempted. But what do you? I mean, let's talk about both of them, Rose and Speed. I mean, do they? Firstly, as I say, they're the two core specialists here. Do their games kind of match up to necessarily what we've been speaking about? And who of the two would you rather be siding with this weekend?
Oh, of the two, it would definitely be Rose. I think that's kind of the simple answer to that. I think Rose's record around here actually is probably underappreciated. It's pretty comparable to Speed. Obviously without a win, but I mean generally he's done it over a longer period. It's been comparable to what Speed has done, which is incredibly impressive. And Speed obviously gets all the plaudits for being the master specialist, but Rose is equally so. I mean Speed, you'd have to almost reserve judgment on him until after this week. It sounds funny, but I was listening to a podcast he was on this morning actually, and he talked about kind of getting a better understanding for a swing and where it is, and he had some kind of feelings that weren't working for him that worked in the past, but he seems like he's getting back to where he wants to be in a kind of positive place with his swing. So if he is, then and he goes well this week, then that 25-1 won't last very long. But I could definitely see him contending, but I just think if you're having a bet at the minute, it'd have to be Rose. Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like when you want to back a horse, but it often misses the break, and you want to back it just after it breaks. But you think with him, if he's 2 under after 6, you're probably going to be looking at a 6-1 shot straight away, aren't you? So
I would worry about Rose, just that he had his opportunity and didn't take it. And I think around Augusta,
broke my heart.
It broke mine too. When you don't get over the line, it becomes a bit more difficult to win the next time. And I think to a certain extent that it can apply to McIlroy as well. And I think McIlroy has a lot more capability to overcome that, and probably will at some stage at Augusta. But that would just worry me about Rose, that he's had his chances and not really taken them. Plus, for me, he's a bit short.
Yeah, fair enough. We are not going to be able to speak about, but after we did this podcast last year, my dad called me and said before it started, he said, "I can't believe you didn't talk about Patrick Reed," and then he obviously went and won. So I'm looking forward to hearing from my dad who's going to win this one after we don't talk about the likes of John Rahm, Ricky Fowler, Paul Casey. Briefly touch on Francesco Molinari, because arguably the best player. I'd like to know how your stats rank him, because to the naked eye it looks like his form over the last year or so has put him up there with the best in the world. He's gone from being notoriously bottly putter to basically being the Iron Man in terms of keeping his cool, and now obviously a major winner at the Open Championship last year. He is currently 25-1. And Niall, you've always been a big fan of his as well, and I know he's someone that you are not too keen on here.
Yeah, I just think price-wise, for a start, skinny enough. I think his price started tumbling last week as he was getting towards the end of the match play, and we saw a few holes in his game on Sunday there in the semi-final. He was, I don't think he had maybe only 1 or 2 bogeys the whole week until Sunday, and then he had 5 in the final round. In the semi-final, he wasn't good on Sunday, and that worries me a little bit with regards to someone like Molinari. He doesn't have the best of records around Augusta. Obviously, his improvement in length off the tee in the last couple of years will help, and you could see a better performance. But for me, he's not one of my potential winners.
How does he rank for you?
Yeah, I mean he's got a very well-rounded game. There's not many courses that don't suit him as such. You can kind of put him out anywhere. He could potentially play well. Form has been okay. Not kind of world-beating form, obviously despite the win, but it's been okay this year. Nothing kind of crazy. His off the tee plays. He's actually 93rd in the world this year off the tee, which isn't ideal, and obviously with the added distance as well. So, and the worrying one for me is that he's 113th, and this will shock a lot of people. He's 113th in approach play this year.
Really?
Yeah. So that's just 2019, but that's kind of an indicator for me that mightn't be the place for him. But like I said, he's like 113 probably sounds worse than it is. He's still positive strokes gained, and he's over I kind of mentioned the threshold was 0.2 of a stroke. He's just over that. So he fits the bill to a point, but like you said, I think at that price he'd be a little bit short for me.
I'd like to hear if you've got much info on Ricky Fowler, because that's one flying under the radar this week that I think could have a big chance. His form this year has been quite impressive. Up until his last couple of performances were just, he's just been inside the top 50, I think, in his last 2 events, and they haven't been that impressive. But for one who went mighty close last year, although it was kind of backdoor contention on the Sunday, and obviously so many major winners recently, and especially winners at Augusta, have been non-major winners. I'm looking at the list of the guys, and I've literally wrote them down, want to analyse them, all the guys who haven't won a major, because I think it definitely does play a big part in these events nowadays. You've got Ram, DeChambeau and Fowler would be the three big names for me that could possibly get over the line.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, the thing about Ricky this year, I think, is that he's gained most of his strokes putting, which isn't a surprise for him. He's an incredibly good putter, but the rest of his game has been, again, he's gaining strokes in all four areas, and he's been kind of in similar form to Molinari. His approach play again is 91st worldwide, which is it's pretty good. It's solid, and his off the tee is 113th. But I think he potentially obviously could go out and win. But the thing about it is it's such a competitive field at the top end there that you're getting guys like that he sort of fits the bill. Like, he looks like he could win it, but there's other guys that just fit it a little bit better for me. So I think there's a very strong argument that you could make for probably 7 or 8 guys up at the top end of the market.
From the sounds of it, I think pretty much all of them.
yeah, pretty much. It's actually very difficult this year. I found it tricky, but
do you not agree with me? It's the toughest major.
Yeah. But I think just
it's lucky I'm about to say who's going to win in a second. But yeah, I'll let you finish first.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just it's a case of whittling it down to 1 or 2 that you think are kind of at the top of that list, and Ricky's obviously thereabouts, but he's just not quite on the top 2 or 3 for me.
So yeah, if you listen regularly to the Oddschecker podcast and you watch his videos, you'll know that I try my best not to give my own opinion, but with golf I find that difficult. So I've been speaking, Niall and I have been WhatsApping over the last couple of weeks about who I think is going to win, and thankfully for once he didn't try and put me off, which was good. I'm all in on Hideki Matsuyama for the Masters this year. He actually came out as being the trend pick as well, which was, I guess, good.
You were delighted with that?
Yeah, I was good. Yeah, I was happy with that, especially because I'd already told you, so you knew it wasn't me just reading Dave Tyndall's opinions and then regurgitating them myself. He's a player who, for the last 2 years, has come into the Masters in really kind of atrocious form, and he's been kind of scrambling for form for a couple of years as well. And he got 2 top 20 finishes in those 2 years coming into Augusta. Before that, he had 2 top 10s as well. So I think we can see very clearly that his game coming into this is in pretty good shape. And his form this season, I think under the radar in terms of actual finishes, has been really, really good. We'll draw a line through the match play, except for the fact that he beat DJ in the 3rd round. And then you got a top 10 at the Players, you got a top 10 in the Genesis, 3rd in the Farmers, and only out the top 30 in one of those events as well. Getting over the line is obviously an issue, but we've seen in the past he's won 2 WGCs, so if he can get that winning touch back, I think that 35-1. I got a bit of 40s last week. He ranks as a decent chance. So Dylan, this is where Niall hasn't put me off, so this is where you're going to have to tell me that I've done my money.
I wouldn't put definitely not at that price. I wouldn't put you off him. Obviously, there's a couple of factors in his favour. He's in good form. He's 10th in the world this year in terms of form. Elite approach player, 3rd in the world in approach. So I know I'm kind of rolling out the same stats for everyone, but that's a pretty key one. I mean, his putting is a concern. He's 250th in putting, but like I said, previous winners, seven.
And he's unbelievably streaky with the putter as well. He gets in these runs where he holds everything. But
exactly, I mean, 7 players in the last 13 years have come in and won it, losing strokes previously putting. So that wouldn't be enough for me to put you off him, and definitely at that price, I wouldn't back against him.
I think he was someone who, for a couple of years, went off far too short for major championships, and obviously he's went through a slump in the last 18 to 24 months, and is kind of coming out of it now. But for me, we haven't seen enough of him in proper contention. There's been a couple of good finishes, but not in the meat of a Sunday finish in the last 1 or 2 groups. That I would like a bit more experience of that this season before heading to Augusta. I'm thinking he can win. But as I say, his record here is actually really good, and one you can almost guarantee he'll probably play well enough again. You'd be in the top 30 at least, So I definitely couldn't put you off, but for me, I'm still questionable why he's get over the line in a major.
Fair enough. I think I'm happy with that. So now, we've got a couple of questions which we'll get to at the end. But before we do so, just wanted to ask you guys, we've tackled most of the top players in the world, certainly the top players in the market. Are there anyone at bigger prices that you flagged up now who are worth a second look at least?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'll never be rushed on my picks, and I always like to wait till the Monday or Tuesday and not get out too early with my decisions in case I change my mind. But as I say, I am concentrating towards the top of the market. But there's a few, not at huge prices, but just down the market a bit that I think could be a bit of value, and whether or not I'll go with them or back them or not, we'll see next week. But I think Jason Day could be drifting to a decent enough price. Obviously, he's a bit of a mystery. Whether what Jason Day is going to turn up, whether he's going to be fit, or even if he isn't fit, he's a bizarre man, but he's someone who's won a major before, but has the capability around Augusta and has played really well before, and been maybe a wee bit unlucky or a bit wet behind the ears. Maybe when he was in contention there a number of years ago, that he just wasn't experienced enough to see it through. But he's one drifting to a decent enough price.
Yeah, 33 to 1 with Boyles at the moment.
Another one is Adam Scott. Showed decent form earlier on in the year as well. Obviously, he's cured a lot of his putting worries, and he was putting, I think, putting the flag in the hole has helped him a fair bit. But he's another one with Augusta form. Obviously, he's won there before. So there are two guys for me, and another one maybe Tony Fina, who finished 10th last year on one leg after going over in the ankle in the par 3 event.
Look at the shivers that.
So there are three guys that are not at huge prices, but again, as we said before earlier on, the top 30 in the world kind of is the place to look.
Yeah, Tony Finau 45 to 1 with Bet365 at the moment. Adam Scott 45 to 1 with Unibet and 888. Dylan, anyone for you?
Show just a little bit down the field, obviously at the 45s, and then I think the only one that stood out for me a little bit further back was Gary Woodland. Kind of fits the bill around the course. He's in really good form this year. He's over that threshold that I talked about for the short-term form. Only concern is his putting a little bit, but like I said, I'm not that worried about somebody coming in not putting that well. So I think he's around the 80s or so. I think that's a decent price on him. So
the one thing I'd be worried about with him is, I don't know if there's any stats to back this up, but from certainly what I've seen in the eye, he hits the ball a lot lower these days. And I've seen him hit so many stingers off the tee, and plenty of left to right shots, which doesn't exactly suit Augusta. But I've seen so much was game now that it's very low.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any stats to back that up, but it certainly looks to me as if his game's kind of changed over the last couple of years. Although he's played very well.
It's interesting how the market takes it into account as well, because Brandon Grace, I spoke about earlier, who obviously has that very low ball flight. He's 150 to 1 for this event. That doesn't reflect in any way his form or his course record or anything really. And it's purely your guess, because it just makes it much harder for him for that approach play.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have stats specifically on the trajectory of players, but from kind of anecdotally watching him, I think what I've seen is he's shaping his shots a lot more. So he tends to, you rarely see him just hitting a dead straight kind of mid-flight shot. It tends to be, I've seen him hitting some high ones, fades, draws, and a lot of those stingers he talked about. But I'm thinking that's a preference from him.
Versatile.
Yeah, I think so. I'm open to correction on that one, but I think that's what that is. But I just like the price on him. I think it's all things considered, I think he's a decent shout.
Interestingly, the one question I wasn't going to read out that we were sent in was from a colleague, and his question was by how far does Gary Woodland win by? So we've already covered that. That he might actually do okay. 6 shots. So a couple of questions now. Unless there's anyone else you want to flag up at bigger prices, we will go.
I was quite liking the look at Bjerregaard last week.
Yeah. Rookie though.
Yeah, rookie of course. But I'm not suggesting he could win it. But one who looked hugely impressive last week in his wins, and the win against Tiger as well. Really played great stuff towards the end of his matches when it really mattered, which impressed me. His rise in the game's been meteoric in the last 18 months. Obviously, is one of the Dunhill links, and then just so many good finishes, and he's now just inside the top 50 in the world, I think, and going the way almost kind of like Alex Noren, but could be better, I think, and possibly one who could win a major in the next few years, just kind of unexpectedly. I know this is a big ask, like first time at Augusta, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe even later on in the year, just someone who could win. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes well, and maybe one to look for in the extra markets when they're priced up next week, top continental European, something like that.
Yeah, look out for that, because Niall and I will try and get on the phone early next week to record a little special podcast on the specials markets as well. It sounds like you and I might be having a rookie match bet, Matt Wallace against Lucas Bjerregaard, but we'll discuss that off air after the podcast. A couple of questions now from people that they've sent in. What do you think of Kuchar's 50-1 price, considering in the form he's in this year, and he's finished in the top 8 at Augusta 4 times in the last 7 years? I don't remember writing that, but it literally reads like exactly something I might write, so that's weird.
Kuchar's in good form, yeah. I mean, there's no debate in that. He's played well this year. Yeah, I mean, I've never really, like, obviously he's got a good record around Augusta as well. I've never really liked him around there. I can't see him closing it out there for some reason. That's kind of more of an opinion of mine. There's no real numbers to back that up, but I just can't see him getting over the line. But 50s is probably a fair price on him.
Someone's playing very well all year, like, and obviously we're back and doing the Surrey Open, was it he won? And
First win of the year, wasn't it?
Yeah. And played very well since. Obviously played well last week, but I think we are seeing a bit of a different Kuchar nowadays than what we've seen in previous years. And if there's ever going to be a time where he could win a Masters or a major, it might be now. Like.
It's worth also pointing out that in that kind of tussle he had with Jordan Spieth in the Open Championship, like, he played absolutely brilliantly that day.
Yeah.
You know, he kept the pace, and they went miles clear of the rest of them. It wasn't a choke.
He didn't like make many birdies or anything.
No,
he just
kept it,
just very consistent golf. While
Exactly.
Spieth was all over the place in the first 9.
So I mean, he's a player. I mean, his Masters record is obviously so good that it means you can kind of try and ignore the distance off the tee issue.
See, that's the issue for me. And then you get a Sunday at Augusta, and say you've backed the likes of Kuchar, and then you go to the 5th hole, for example, which has been lengthened this year. I think they've put another 30 or 40 yards on it. So it was tough enough without that on it. And you just think he's probably going to be going in there with a hybrid. And see, on a Sunday, that hole is absolute dynamite. And you hit the fairway and you're just thinking to yourself, if you're back, oh God, we'll be lucky to get out of this hole with a bogey.
And it's also surprising to see him turning up at the Valero this weekend, having played so much golf last weekend, Wednesday through to Sunday, to see him going and playing another presumably 4 days before the Masters seems like a bit surprising. He thought he may take the weekend off just to kind of recharge the batteries after losing that final as well. Maybe
those kind of guys just like to ride the form.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, he's always been one who's played a lot of golf, hasn't he, down the years? He's never taken many breaks, but as I say, if there's ever going to be a time you could win one, it probably is this year. And
so 2 more questions before I'm going to ask you for your bet of the week, your long shot of the weekend, and your lay of the weekend as well. 2 more. So this is Mark Leishman at 3-1 to be top Aussie, the bet of the century. I'm guessing, given you've already mentioned Jason Day and Adam Scott, your answer is going to be no.
No, because I think Leishman has a real chance of going well again. Like, obviously, he's always been a popular choice at Augusta this last couple of years. If you read previews and tipsters, I think he went well there, very well, like a number of 7 or 8 years ago now. But he's one of those non-major winners who definitely has the ability to get over the line. I'm very impressed with his wins in the last couple of years because they've been mainly from the front. I think he's proved a very good front runner, and someone who gets the lead is definitely not afraid of winning.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's obviously in good form this year. He's top 100 in the world in all 4 areas, so well-rounded game. I don't think it's the bet of the century, no. Might be worth a little bit, but yeah, I quite like Adam Scott as well. I think he's rounded into form nicely as well, and the kind of, historically him not being the best putter is less of a concern here than usual. So, I think Adam Scott could go well, so I wouldn't be lumping on Leishman top Aussie, but I think in the outright market and the each way could be worth a look.
And the final player we're going to talk about is Jon Rahm. I'd be amazed if any other Masters preview podcast covers as many players as we have, but hopefully we've covered the winner at some stage. Considering Rahm has only finished in the top 10 of a major twice in his career and missed the cut in 2 of the last 3, why do you think he is such a short price at 16-1, and what price would you back him at? We'll go for the why do you think he's such a short price first.
I think it's probably just his recent form. You know, he's had a very good record this year. He's played very well. Just get his numbers up here, but yeah, he's 9th in the world this year. 2nd off the tee and 75th on approach. So I mean, he's played very, very well this year. I think that's justification for that kind of price. I mean, obviously the fact that he's never got over the line in the major, he hasn't won any kind of big events, anything that's comparable to the Masters really. So I think that would be a negative in his bracket. So.
And that shot at Sawgrass as well probably doesn't really help.
Absolutely, yeah. Knowing that he's liable to do that, I mean, he could be, and that's there at the Masters as well. We've seen it so many times before where someone's on 12 or whatever, you know, and it all kind of capitulates. So knowing that that's in the bag would be another big negative for me on him.
Unless you're Sergio, then you knock it on the hold the putt.
I think that, obviously with Rahm, he's obviously his temperament is always talked about, and it's very important with regards to winning a major championship, but it's so much more important this week at Augusta. As I said earlier on, I think the key to winning this will be the par 4 scoring, and he's just not somebody that strikes me over the course of 4 days to have the patience to grind out that level par or a couple under par on the par 4s to be, you know, he could make mincemeat of the par 5s on his day, but you need to be very patient and have a level head and be quite. I just don't see that par 4 scoring being good enough.
And it's interesting that we talk about kind of the mental capacity going into a Masters. You picked Paul Casey last year, whose ability to get over the line has been questioned in the past. He obviously got that win a couple of weekends ago and did well to do so. With the Masters, do you look at this more like than other events, or is it something that you just have to kind of always look at when you're
maybe about it. It's tough to get over the line in any golf tournament, and I think the general public, so to speak, give players far too much stick for you know, and label players bottlers far too much and far too easy.
Someone has to come second.
It's not the case. You know, Paul Casey is not a bottler. Like no matter how many times he might individually bottle a tournament, or whether it just doesn't work out for him or not, winning a golf tournament is such a complex thing in the head and the hands, and you know, it's just not easy, and it's easy for the general public to go, you can't back him, sure he never gets over the line. And you've heard that of Lee Westwood down the years as well. How many wins he got? Must near 30 wins or something worldwide. Casey's racking them up, and then obviously the Valspar has been 2 years in the trot now, but he's a great record at Augusta, and there's no doubt that just on any given Sunday he could do it, and anybody dismissing anybody on that factor that they've, you know, bottled tournaments, it's the wrong approach.
Yeah, I think I'd probably have a similar view, alright, that, you know, there's definitely potential that anyone could show up. Casey, for instance, could definitely show up and win it, but I'd factor into the analysis a little bit you know, whether they've got over the line in comparable events. So like Schauffele, for example, winning WGC, that's a big thing for me, that he's, you know, that's a big event that he's got there. JT obviously having won you know, his major before, I think it's a factor for me to be a little boost, you know, on if it was kind of a deciding factor between backing somebody and not backing them, it would be kind of that element of it.
Yeah, well, I remember that back nine of JT's in the USPGA was some hairy iron shots going into greens that day, hitting it into the mound to the back. So we're going to close it off there and just ask you guys both. I'll start with Niall. Just on your best bet, your long shot, and your lay of the week.
Best bet at the minute is going to be Dustin Johnson. As I say, I won't be rushed on the picks, so Dustin Johnson will be my pick of the week. So next week, even though, you know, plenty will say it's not major value or anything, it's not something I particularly look for in major weeks. The prices are there, and they ain't going to move too much. So I think Dustin Johnson is the most likely winner for me, and he'll be my biggest number. Lay of the week would probably be Molinari. I don't fancy him to go well at all. I wasn't impressed last Sunday with his performance in the semi-final, and I just don't think Augusta suits him that much, and various factors come in. I don't like him.
Yeah. And the lay? Sorry, and the long shot.
The long shot still really to come up with that as well. We're talking a long shot next week at Augusta is going to be a 50-1 poke for me probably. I don't think we'll be reaching for 3 figures. I would rather back some 3-figure golfers in some action markets. So Long shot of the week, probably for me at the minute, would be Tony Finau.
Tony Finau. Dylan, same to you.
Bet of the week, I think all around JT. If you can get 18s, 10 places, might be optimistic, but if you can get that, then I'd be all over that. I think I've got him in the model about 74 for a top 10. So, there's obviously plenty of value there. And then I think in the outright, I've actually got him at 16s or just over 16s. So I think there's just generally value all around on him. He'd be the bet of the week. I think lay of the week, probably going to go Koepka. He's obviously, it's obvious that he's won 3 of his last 6 or whatever, but just the recent form is putting me off him a lot. I'm not convinced it's there. I think there's been a lot of weight loss or something going on there. I don't know what the underlying story is to that, and I don't know how much that's going to affect his game, but he says he's struggling for touch and he's lost a few yards off the tee, so that's just another negative on him. So I think he'd be my lay of the week. And then long shot, I'll take 45 to 1 on Schauffele as a long shot.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to give my opinions very briefly. Hideki Matsuyama is my pick. My lay is John Rahm. And don't say that we don't give you something back. I'm going to tip up at 1,000 to 1 shot on the exchange in Satoshi Kodara. I thought he played decent golf at the WGC last year. He came tied 25th in the Masters in his debut season. He's won on the PGA Tour before. He's probably going to come nowhere, but I don't really see how he's at the same price as the likes of Woozy. So if you want to have, yeah, I know. So if you want to have £1 on 1,000 to 1 shot, don't blame me when he's shot a couple of 80s. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers, Niall, and cheers, Dylan, for your input. As I say, next week, hopefully, Niall and I will be able to find some time to have a quick chat on the specials market, and make sure you look out for his column that will be coming out probably Monday, Tuesday. Monday probably before the event, and keep an eye on all the stuff that the 15th Club are doing. Probably best to do so on social media, I'm guessing.
Yeah, on Twitter account or on the website,
Yeah, so you can find all that stuff there, analysis of the week ahead of it and during it, I'm sure.